Imagine spending years in a dungeon, chained, interrogated, and tortured. Most people would break down, but one man used his prison sentence to create a book that would influence secret societies, philosophers, utopians, and political movements for centuries to come. This is the story of Tomaso Campanella, a Dominican friar accused of conspiring against the Spanish government, a man who managed to avoid the death penalty by pretending to be insane. While sitting in his cell under the walls of Naples, he created one of the most mysterious works of European history, the City of the Sun. But is this just a philosophical fantasy? Or is it a detailed plan for a society that someone tried to build in reality? And why the ideas from this book have continued to resurface in secret orders, religious movements, and social experiments for centuries. Today we'll trace the path of a book born in a prison cell that, according to some researchers, left its mark on some of the most mysterious intellectual movements in Europe. Naples, 1602. In a stone cell deep beneath the fortress of Castel Sant'Elmo sits a man, 34 years old. His hair is long, his shirt is blood-stained, and his wrists still bear the marks of ropes and shackles. He has been in prison for 4 years now. The Spanish authorities have uncovered the conspiracy he orchestrated, and the death sentence seems inevitable. The only thing that saves him from the gallows is his extraordinary ability to simulate madness so convincingly that even the inquisitors cannot judge whether they are dealing with a madman or an extremely cunning person. His name is Tomaso Campanella, a Dominican friar, philosopher, astrologer, and one of the most extraordinary thinkers of his time. By the light of a single candle, he begins to write a book. A book about an ideal city. A city divided into 7 concentric circles. Each circle is named after a celestial body. A city in which no one owns private property. A city in which education is a duty for all. A city where spiritual leaders observe the stars and organize society according to cosmic principles. He calls this place the City of the Sun. Over the next 400 years, the ideas in this book would resurface again and again, from the secret German brotherhoods of the 17th century, to various utopian communities in the 19th century, to social and political experiments in the 20th century. Thus, A Prisoner's Book gradually becomes something much more than a literary work. To understand why, we need to go back to the beginning. Tomaso Campanella was born in the 16th century in Stigliano, a small village in Calabria, in southern Italy. His father was a poor tanner, and his family lived modestly. Even as a child, Campanella showed an exceptional memory and curiosity. At the age of 14, he entered the Dominican order and quickly attracted the attention of his teachers. He studied philosophy, theology, astronomy, and natural sciences. Very soon, he began to question the authorities of his time. He was particularly influenced by the philosopher Bernardino Telesio, who argued that nature should be studied through observation, not just through ancient authorities. For the young Campanella, this was a revolutionary idea. Even in his early years, he wrote treatises against some of the traditional Aristotelian philosophy. Such views quickly made him enemies. In 1592, he was arrested in Rome on suspicion of heresy. He was interrogated and pressured to recant his views. Officially, he complied, but internally he did not give up his ideas. After his release, he returned to Calabria. There, young monks, intellectuals, and people dissatisfied with Spanish rule gradually began to gather around him. At that time, Calabria was under the control of the Spanish Empire. The population was burdened with heavy taxes. The Inquisition exerted strong pressure on society. The feudal system left a large part of the people in poverty. Campanella began to preach that a new historical era was approaching. According to him, comets, eclipses, and celestial phenomena were signs of impending changes. He believes that the old order must be replaced with a new society governed by wisdom and spiritual knowledge. Gradually, a conspiracy takes shape. The plan envisioned Calabria being liberated from Spanish rule, and in its place, a theocratic republic governed by philosophers and clergy would be established. A state organized according to astrological and religious principles. On August 10, 1599, the conspiracy was uncovered. 70 people were arrested, 4 were executed almost immediately. Campanella managed to escape briefly, but was soon captured. Interrogations, torture, and long years in prison followed. It was then that the most unusual chapter of his life began. Instead of breaking down, he begins to describe on paper the society he fails to build in reality. Thus, the city of the sun is born. At first glance, it is a utopia, but the more carefully one reads the text, the more it resembles a detailed project. Campanella describes the architecture of the city, the way of government, the system of education, the organization of labor, and even the daily life of its inhabitants. The city is built of 7 concentric circles. Each of them is named after one of the 7 celestial bodies known to Renaissance astrology: Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. 4 main streets cross the city and are oriented towards the 4 cardinal directions. In the center stands a large temple with a dome. 2 spheres are placed on the floor, one symbolizing the earth and the other the sky. The walls and ceilings are decorated with maps of the stars, constellations, and the cosmos. 24 priests live in the temple, who constantly observe the sky and interpret the movement of the stars. In this city, there is no private property. Clothes, food, tools, and housing belong to the community. Everyone works 4 hours a day, and the rest of the time is devoted to learning and improvement. Particularly interesting is the educational system. Instead of books, much of the knowledge is depicted on the walls in the form of pictures, diagrams, and symbols. Children learn through observation and visual images. According to Campanella, knowledge should be accessible to all. The most controversial part of his vision, however, is related to the family and fertility. There is no traditional marriage in the city of the sun. Special astrologers determine when certain people should have children based on the positions of the celestial bodies. The goal is to create the best possible generation. Today, such ideas sound extremely controversial, but they are precisely what make the book so unusual and have provoked fierce debate from the very beginning. And just when it seems that this story will remain locked within the walls of a cell, the next stage of its influence begins. 200 years later, history takes another curious turn. In the mid-19th century, in the state of New York, in a small village called Oneida, a man named John Humphrey Noyes established a community that quickly attracted the attention of all of America. It would last for more than 3 decades, reach several hundred members, and implement a system that Noyes calls a compound marriage. The principle is unusual. Every man is related to every woman in the community. Personal and exclusive relationships are not encouraged. Children are raised collectively. And when the community decides to increase its numbers, it introduces a special system for selective reproduction. A committee of elders determines which couples can have children based on spiritual, intellectual, and physical qualities. To many, this seems like an early form of eugenics. Curiously, the idea is strongly reminiscent of the principles described by Campanella in the City of the Sun more than 2 centuries earlier. Whether Noyes was directly inspired by Campanella is still debated by historians, but the similarities are obvious. And here a bigger picture begins to take shape. Utopias rarely remain just on the pages of books, from Plato's Republic to Thomas More's Utopia, Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, Campanella's City of the Sun, and Johann Valentin Andre's Christianopolis. Similar ideas appear everywhere. Ideal society, common ownership, ruled by wise men, control over education, control over reproduction, cities designed according to mathematical and sometimes cosmic principles. Even more interesting is that when such ideas appear in literature, they often later begin to find reflection in the real world. We can find individual elements of them in the French Revolutionary experiments, in various social communes, in large-scale public projects, in planned cities, and in political systems that strive to create a perfect order. Here, a more conspiratorial reading also appears. According to him, the ideas from the utopian books do not spread by chance. They are transmitted over the centuries through various intellectual circles, philosophical societies, and esoteric movements. From this perspective, utopias are plans for the future, not just literary works. It sounds intriguing, but here we need to take an important step back. The more carefully one examines the facts, the more complex the picture becomes. Yes, the connection between Campanella and some German intellectuals is well documented. Yes, his manuscripts reached Germany. Yes, Christianopolis contains a number of similar ideas, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a secret conspiracy. It could just be intellectual influence. The same way Aristotle influenced medieval thinkers, or Kant influenced philosophers after him. Books are read, ideas are passed down, thoughts pass from one generation to the next. Furthermore, City of the Sun was never a secret document. Campanella did not hide it. On the contrary, he actively sought ways to have his work published and disseminated. If this were a secret manual for a select few, it would hardly have been published so openly, and Campanella himself is not the figure we often imagine today. He is not a mysterious magician hidden behind a veil of secret societies. He is a Dominican friar, philosopher, and religious reformer who, to the end of his life, believed that the world could be transformed through spiritual renewal and enlightenment. Historians often emphasize that Campanella was a man of his time, an era in which science, religion, astrology, philosophy, and politics still existed in a common space, and were not as clearly separated as they are today. That's why many believe it's a mistake to view the City of the Sun as a hidden plan for world domination. But even without secret societies, ideas hold immense power. Campanella never saw his city built. Johann Valentin André never built Christianopolis. Plato never saw his republic, yet their ideas live on. They have inspired generations of thinkers, reformers, architects, and politicians. And when we look at the modern world, it's sometimes hard not to notice certain similarities. Large cities built according to centralized plans, surveillance systems, public structures run by experts, technologies that allow for ever greater control over daily life. Is this the fulfillment of old utopias? Or simply a natural result of the development of human societies? The answer probably depends on your point of view. Maybe utopias were never instructions. Maybe they were mirrors. Mirrors in which each era sees its own dreams, fears, and ambitions. That is why, more than 4 centuries after Tomaso Campanella's death, his book continues to provoke controversy. Some see it as a warning, others see it as inspiration, still others see it as a historical curiosity. But one thing is certain. Few books written in a prison cell have left such a long mark on human history, and perhaps that is the greatest mystery. Not whether Campanella was a prophet or a conspirator. And why do his ideas continue to resonate so strongly today? And while the world continues to debate his legacy, a bigger question remains. How much of what we accept as history is actually history? And how carefully selected is this version of the past? This is a topic that deserves its own investigation. Because the next story takes us to one of the most interesting topics in human civilization, the battle for knowledge, control over information, and the question of who determines what we should remember and what we should forget. The legacy of a dangerous idea. There is something else that makes the story of Tomaso Campanella so extraordinary. Most people who spend decades in prison disappear from history. Their names are forgotten, and their dreams die with them. Campanella spent nearly 3 decades behind bars, but instead of being broken, he turned prison into his academy. He wrote dozens of books. He reflected on philosophy, politics, religion, and the structure of society. He corresponded with scholars and rulers, and gradually became one of the most influential figures of his time. When he was finally released, his ideas had already left the walls of his cell long before him. They travel across Europe. They pass through universities, monasteries, and philosophical circles. They inspire some, they frighten others, but they leave no one indifferent. And perhaps that is the true power of ideas. They don't need armies, they don't need wealth, they don't even need freedom. Sometimes all it takes is one candle, one cell, and one person who refuses to stop thinking. 4 centuries later, the City of the Sun continues to be read, analyzed, and discussed. And that means the battle that began in that damp stone cell beneath Castel Sant'Elmo is not yet over. The story of Tomaso Campanella is much more than the story of a monk, a philosopher, or a prisoner. It is a story about the power of ideas, about the ability of a book to outlive its time. On the question of whether utopias are just dreams or sometimes turn into plans for the future, whether Campanella was a prophet, a dangerous dreamer, or simply a man who wanted to create a better world, we will probably never know for sure. But one thing is certain, his ideas continue to provoke debate more than 4 centuries after they were written, and that in itself is an extraordinary achievement. Thank you to all of you who stayed with us until the very end of this journey through history, philosophy, and one of the most influential books of European civilization. If you found the video interesting, support the channel with a like. Share your opinion in the comments. Do you think that the City of the Sun is just a utopian fantasy, or is there something much deeper hidden in it? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next documentary investigations. Your support helps us continue to create content about forgotten stories, mysteries of the past, and ideas that change the world. Thank you for being with us. Until the next video.